You're listening to Your Best Life, powered by MercyOne. Join us as we have a fun conversation with certified experts and physicians about health topics for you and your family. It's Your Best Life, our one purpose.
We're talking today with Dr. Stephen Grant, and he is a medical director of sleep medicine. And we've just passed that time of year where once again we spring forward and lose an hour of sleep. And this time of year seems to be debated of, is it a good thing? Does it affect the body? You lose an hour of sleep. What does losing sleep mean? What could it do to your overall health? And so those are some of the things we'd like to discuss today with Dr. Grant. So Dr. Grant, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
For the person who says, well, what's the big deal about giving up an hour of sleep? Does it have an impact, losing just an hour, or is just an hour an understatement?
Well, I think it's more impactful based on, I don't think anybody really gets enough sleep. And there are times in my own life, I'll raise my hand and confess to that. So the signal to noise ratio becomes widened when you're starting with a baseline of somewhat insufficient sleep. So it just sounds like an hour, but if you're only getting 5 or 6 hours a night and you take that hour away, you can see some real consequences from that. And there are some interesting epidemiologic data that we know happens in health around time changes, some financial data that there are changes in financial markets. There are changes in crime statistics around daylight saving time. So, these aren't just colloquial stories, but data that, we can see and track. And, to offer it, to suggest that this is why we have to get rid of daylight saving time, I'm not going to look at the epidemiologic points or some of the other data that we can clearly see association, if not causality, around daylight saving, but suggest to you that people are designed to just get up at one time, go to bed at one time, find a natural rhythm, and that daylight saving time, moving the clock, disrupts that. I don't know if I answered your question, but I will say that taking an hour out of somebody's life when they're only getting 5 or 6 hours is more impactful than grabbing an hour out of somebody's life when they're getting 8 or 9 hours a night.
Absolutely. And one of the studies of the many that you've mentioned, there have been some studies that look at safety on the highway and other instances where that hour could cost a life. And one of the studies I read said like maybe 28 extra lives a year. So does that make it worth it?
Well, yeah. Anytime people are sleep insufficient, they're impaired. You can get to a point where you're so sleep deprived, and from a psychomotor vigilance standpoint, like whether it's operational tasks, using motor coordination, hand-eye coordination, navigating, there's an impairment there that equals like OWI at one point. So when we look at the NTSB data around accidents around the time change, I would just say that that's more representative of people driving at a time when they would normally be maybe sleeping or earlier in their day, as well as the fact that it's probably more representative of those were the people that weren't that prepared for this. Those are the people that probably get a radical degree of insufficient sleep, and that hour loss of sleep is almost magnified and can result in inattention and issues around safety and safe motor vehicle operation.
As a expert in sleep medicine, one thing that you know very well is that loss of sleep can impact the rest of an individual's health. And what are some of the ways that can happen, where someone's health can be compromised by not getting up to, is it 7 hours of sleep the average person needs?
Well, the median, is 8, but we know that defines that 50% of people need more and 50% of people need less. But as a society, it is rare. I could count on one hand the number of people that I meet in a 6-month time frame that get more than 8 hours a night sleep. Human beings are circadian, the Latin term for circa dia, or around the day. We are designed to sleep and regenerate our central nervous system, leak growth hormone, repair our bodies, try and mitigate the oxidative stress of living and burning calories. And I think that for most people, they look at the term circadian and they think of the brain and the desire to kind of sleep at night and be awake during the day. But the narrative is much deeper than that. Our brains are circadian, but multiple organs in our body are circadian too. Specifically our heart, our liver, our stomach, our kidneys. There are multiple physiologic systems that are designed to be quiescent at night and active during the day. And when you tax them with either activity or at night, or more importantly, when they should be active during the day and people are sleeping, like shift workers, we can see derangements in metabolic activity. We can see a proclivity for people to have poorly controlled diabetes. We can see people struggle with their body mass and struggle with obesity. We can see a higher point prevalence of heart disease. We can see a higher point prevalence of other issues that we can clearly look back and ascribe a causality to this circadian misalignment.
And with obesity and cardiovascular disease, those over the years have seemed to go almost hand in hand. And is that because an individual is awake later, and then if they're using some of the digital toys and television and things like that to stay up later, they end up consuming more, and that then results in some of these conditions? Is it just not being in bed?
Right. Well, yeah. And also I would say to you that there's some, hard science and something related to, hormonal imbalance, metabolic balance. People that are sleep deprived or have insufficient sleep have a higher resistance to a neurohormone we call leptin. Leptin made some news in the late 80s when they finally designed a mouse model where they knocked the gene expression out, and we had these obese little mice. And we really felt at that time that we'd made some real inroads into understanding mechanisms around obesity. It turns out that, we just got a little tiny aperture into the window instead of the big bay window that we thought it would be. But what we do know is that leptin is associated with kind of like a satiety meter. Like leptin is I've eaten enough. And what we know is that people that are sleep insufficient have leptin insensitivity. Just as diabetics have some degree of insulin insensitivity, people that are sleep insufficient have leptin insensitivity. And not only that, but upregulation of another neural hormone called ghrelin that acts on the stomach and actually induces hunger. There are some other point of note on that. We can have upregulation of another part of our gustatory system, which is a receptor on our tongue called the umami receptor. Umami is a Japanese word for delicious, and I think they get to name it because they were the ones that discovered it. But what we also know is that people that are sleep insufficient have a proclivity to choose kind of salty or sweet food. So not only are we resistant to appetite, in other words, the enough meter doesn't work right. Not only, and that's that leptin insensitivity that I was talking to you earlier about, not only are we more hungry because of the ghrelin upregulation, okay? To top it all off, we have this proclivity to seek out salty or sweet foods that touch that umami receptor. And it kind of sets up a perfect storm of people that are up late doing things, eating, not feeling full, feeling more hungry, and then choosing kind of carbohydrate dense foods that then only feed back and further compound the problem.
Now, I've heard that with lack of sleep, that just not getting that sleep can also cause issues with the heart itself, as far as heart rhythms or the ability to function at an efficient level. Is there any truth to that?
Yeah, I mean, the narrative around that is a little bit more subtle, but people can get into some. I would not say that it's singularly due to sleep deprivation, right? But we do know that there's some autonomic dysregulation where people that are up too long Their basal metabolism is altered. But let me talk a little bit about insufficient sleep in the heart in the context of people that have troubles with sleep apnea. Sleep apnea is individuals that don't ventilate appropriately at night. They have a low oxygen level and a higher carbon dioxide level. Okay. And an easy way to conceive this is, human beings are just big batteries, right? Back in the day when we had lead acid batteries, not lithium ion ones now, but lead acid batteries, you remember we needed like a specific pH for the battery to work right. We needed to get the right water levels in them. And that's kind of the way human beings are. We're electrical organisms. Our heartbeats are electrical. Our brain signals are electrical. Our cellular processes rely on an action potential across membranes. We're just big walking batteries, okay? So at night, people that have issues with apnea or ventilating, they can raise up their carbon dioxide levels to a point where they get almost a transitory respiratory acidosis, where they alter the pH of their own body, and they can actually impact the electrical functioning, just as in a regular battery. That's why you'll see people at night with sleep apnea have more issues around arrhythmias. You see all-cause mortality for cardiac events at night. You see issues around atrial fibrillation and other arrhythmias, whether they're benign or malignant. I mean, issues around just PVCs, innocent arrhythmias, or arrhythmias that could cause people trouble associated with sleep disordered breathing in general and obstructive sleep apnea in particular.
And also, it doesn't just stop there. Of course, your heart, that's the engine that the body needs. That causes an issue, but also lack of sleep can affect the brain from a behavioral standpoint as well. What are some of the ways that lack of sleep can impact your behavioral health?
Shakespeare wrote about it in Macbeth. There's this great quote, sleep is the balm of a hurt mind. I think everybody intrinsically understands that their resilience to stress, their overall mood, their mentation, their executive functioning, their ability to read, compute, think is certainly blunted or diminished in the context of periods of insufficient sleep. Sleep in and of itself is intimately related to memory consolidation as well. We know that there's a denser degree of REM sleep in patients that are in active learning environments. And when you deprive the brain of REM periods, memory consolidation is harder. It's harder to remember things. It's harder to learn things. It's harder to memorize things. We know that there's more emotional lability in people that are sleep insufficient, kind of like maybe a disproportionate degree of either irritability or distress tolerance in general, whether it's being less patient with situations or being short or rude with people. I would suggest to you that it's clear to me that beyond orientation to children where, they're cranky, they just haven't had their nap yet, and the child gets their nap and they notice changes in the emotional valence of the child. I think that that's a very clear proxy well into adulthood, where patients that are insufficient in sleep can manifest in behavioral changes, impacts in mood and mentation, impacts in depression, anxiety, self-help rating scales. People generally rate their physical and mental health at a lower level when they're in periods of insufficient sleep.
How does a person get help? First, how do they know that they need help? And then how do they go about getting help in improving their sleep or dealing with a serious condition like sleep apnea?
Sleep specialists treat not just sleep apnea. We get referrals from dentists for people that have bad teeth grinding. We get referral from pain specialists where we have patients that have poorly controlled pain due to issues around poor sleep. We manage people that are too tired during the day. We call that hypersomnia. We manage people with issues when they can't sleep or can't stay asleep, broadly known as insomnia. We deal with some people have issues around activities when they sleep, sleepwalking, sleep talking, sometimes acting out their dreams and hurting themselves. The pathways into a sleep clinic can be either through a primary care provider that a patient may present to and speak to about their current health condition, and the doctor there may say, hey, I think you need to see a sleep specialist. Or sometimes the patients themselves can get feedback from bed partners saying, hey, you're making a lot of noise when you sleep at night. You're not breathing and waking up. And the patients can refer themselves.
Do you feel that there's been a steady or maybe more growth in options that are available for individuals as the field of sleep medicine has continued to evolve? Because my understanding is sleep medicine's a relatively newer science
Right.
compared to some of the others.
Right. I think that things certainly improve and get better. I mean, just from an observational standpoint, I've been doing sleep medicine for about 12 years now, full-time, dedicated for about 3 years. And I've just seen great advances just in CPAP therapy, machines getting smaller and smaller, more intelligent, more comfortable. The interface is better. I've seen great advances in dental sleep medicine, looking at how oral appliances are fitted, the comfort of them. There have been very profound advances in surgical management. There's an intervention that we are standing up here at MercyOne Clive called Inspire, which is a genioglossal nerve implantation where we stimulate the tongue at night into a certain posture when patients are sleeping so that it opens up their airway. There's some exciting things going on, but what I think it all leads to is an ongoing awareness and manifestation that sleep is critical. It impacts individuals in multiple domains of their physical and mental health. Once they are kind of consulted on and kind of captured it in a medical care system with sleep medicine integrated into it, we like to work collaboratively with everyone involved in the patient's care around identification of the problem, an indexing of severity, and then an intervention based on outcome.
This is one of the most important things you might do for yourself in life is get a good night's sleep. It's more than just a statement.
Well, yeah. And I think over time, like a lot of things, you know, the stressors and the buffeting of life informs our experience that most people, when they get over the 40-yard line, get above 40 years old, I think they start to understand how intimately related sleep is to their physical and psychological well-being. There's less resilience to shift work or sleep deprivation. Eventually, men, as they age and they get above the 50 years old, there's certain screening that happens in their life, and men that are identified as having issues with blood pressure or atrial fibrillation, troubles with prediabetes or obesity. Sometimes the primary care physicians are kind of baking into the evaluation and the workup a referral to sleep medicine. So if you were to say to me, you know, what's the one piece of advice I could give somebody? I think it's really dependent upon the individual, where they are, how old they are, what their current active medical problems are. But it doesn't take a sleep medicine physician to see or ascribe the causality between poor sleep and active medical problems for people, or just emotional and physical health, that they can say, I understand in my own self that when I'm not sleeping well, I just don't feel well. I rate my physical health as lower and I rate my mental health as lower.
Well, that's good advice, Dr. Grant, and we've covered a lot of territory in this short time together, but hopefully we've encouraged people to pay attention to their sleep, and that it's not just something that has to happen, but it's another way that they can care for themselves along with their health experts to live their best life. Thank you very, very much. We have enjoyed it, and let's hope we can all find some more restful nights ahead.
Yeah, Greg, good to talk to you. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, let us know what you thought of this podcast in an email to podcast@mercyhealth.com or find us at mercyone.org/podcast. There's a form you can fill out to send us your feedback and also find all of our episodes. Until next time, live your best life.